is murdered at the White Lotus? That is the mystery to be solved in the show, The White Lotus Season 1. And if you know anything about this channel, you know I need to find out if I can solve this mystery before the show reveals it. So this is how it works. This is not a recap of the show White Lotus. This is me watching the show for the very first time and trying to solve the big mystery before the reveal. So after every few episodes that I watch, I will jump in here and break down the different suspects, theories, and clues that I have for who I think is the one who dies. And each time that I am in here, I will lock in an official guess for that section or that episode. So that way, when we get to the end and we find out who done it, or who died in this case, we can look back and see exactly how close or far off I was from getting it right. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump right into episode 1 and see if I can solve the White Lotus before the reveal.
The goal is to disappear behind our masks as pleasant, interchangeable helpers. It's tropical kabuki.
This video is sponsored by HelloFresh. Now, I personally use HelloFresh all of the time. I was eating out and ordering out all the time. It was getting super expensive, and so I started getting HelloFresh delivered. HelloFresh sends you a detailed recipe and all of the ingredients that you need to make the meals, which keeps cooking from being overwhelming. I never thought that I would look forward to cooking, but I really enjoy doing the HelloFresh meals. It's like an activity that I can look forward to in the evenings. The recipes take 30 minutes or less, which saves me a ton of time. It's quicker than waiting for delivery, plus everything shows up right at my door. So no parking lots, no checkout lines, and no forgetting ingredients. And it's super flexible. I can pause, skip weeks, or swap meals. No commitment, no pressure. Thanks to HelloFresh, I have saved time, changed my eating habits, and had a ton of fun cooking. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. They've delivered over 1 billion meals, and over 9 million customers use HelloFresh. So if that sounds great, you can use my link down in the description or my code CHASEFM at HelloFresh.com for 10 free meals plus free shipping. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New or returning subscribers only. Varies by plan. Sign up today. Now, back to White Lotus.
Happy to be here.
We're on our honeymoon.
You're such valued guests. Welcome to the White Lotus.
I just watched episode 1 of The White Lotus, and the big mystery is shown to us right away. The opening scene, we see this guy at the airport, and he's talking to this couple, and we get this exchange. Where'd you stay? The White Lotus. White Lotus? Our guide told us someone was killed there this week. And that, right there, is our mystery. Because after that scene, the opening scene, we jump backwards 1 week, and we know that someone is going to die. The big question is who? And then the rest of the episode is us learning and meeting the cast of characters for this show, and we're thinking, is this the person who dies, or is that the person who dies? And that's what we're going to try to figure out. So to get started, we are going to start by going over the cast of characters that we meet in episode 1. Starting with the guy that we see in the opening scene at the airport where he has the exchange with that couple. His name is Shane with his new wife, Rachel. They are on their honeymoon. Now, what is immediately brought to our attention is that in this opening scene that we got, where we see Shane in the airport, and he's talking about how someone died there this week, Shane is all alone. And when the couple he's talking to goes, "Where's your wife?" he says, "Mind your fucking business." And this exchange is happening as the dead body, which is in like a wooden crate with a big stamp that says human remains, is being loaded up onto the plane. So the immediate implication of this scene is that his new wife is the one who's dead. And because this opening scene is heavily implying to us, the audience, that Rachel is the one who is going to die, then I think that that means she is not going to be the one who dies. Especially when we start to learn a little bit more about Shane and Rachel in this first episode. We learn that Shane is kind of just a spoiled brat rich kid crybaby, and Rachel is a little bit more of a down to earth. She doesn't come from money. we are seeing cracks form in their brand new marriage. We learn things like they just met last September, so it happened very quickly because Shane is very demanding and persuasive. We learn that Rachel is just like a journalist who wants to change the world, and she's obviously very sick and tired of Shane's entitlement. Everything that we learn about these two in this episode tells me that Rachel is not the one who dies this week. I think it's a lot more likely she's just going to leave him and they're going to break up on their honeymoon. So that means that we can eliminate Rachel from our list of potential, not suspects, I guess in this case, victims, our list of potential victims. And that means that we could also eliminate Shane as one of our potential victims, the person who dies at the White Lotus, because we see Shane at the airport after everything is all said and done. So that means that Shane survives through the week. Moving on to our next group of characters, the Mossbacher family. That is Mark and Nicole. That's the mom and dad. Well, the mom and dad. They have 2 kids, Liv and Quinn. And then Liv brought her friend Paula. This is a wild group. Mark is worried that he has testicular cancer. Nicole is the CEO of Poof. It's some giant company. I'm not quite sure what it does. But basically, she is the breadwinner of the family. Liv, classic mean girl, very rich, spoiled, snobby. Her and her friend Paula keep judging everyone around them. They keep giggling to themselves. The kind of giggling that if you were in middle school and you overheard people giggling at you like that, you would, be like, I'm never coming back to school. My mom's going to have to homeschool me now. And then Quinn is the son. They mentioned something about him stimming, so I think he might be autistic. I'm not for sure. But yeah, he seems like a sweet kid, but he is a part of this super rich family, so he could turn out to not be so nice. Then there's Tanya. Now, Tanya's a wacky lady, bro. She's here alone to spread her mother's ashes. And in this episode, her whole thing is that she needs a massage, like as soon as possible. We do learn a little bit of her as a person, right? She talks about how she runs off any relationship she's ever had because she becomes so obsessed with them. And then we see her become obsessed with one of the women who works at the White Lotus, Belinda. Now, Belinda's very interesting. She gives Tanya like a massage thing, which causes Tanya to become obsessed with her. And then we see Belinda just a couple times in this episode, helping Tanya. And then at the end of the episode, helping deliver a baby, which brings us to Lonnie. It's her first day working at the White Lotus, and she actually goes into labor in her new boss's office. It's really pitiful. She didn't want to tell them that she was pregnant because she really needed the job, and I guess she was afraid they wouldn't hire her if they realized she was like 9 months pregnant. And then the whole episode ends with her giving birth in her new boss's office, so I'm very excited to see how that goes down. Because I don't even know if we'll get to see her again, because I imagine she'll want to be at home with her new baby. I don't imagine she'll come back to work the next day. Speaking of her boss, we do meet Armand. He is the resort manager. He's a fun character. He's running around making sure all the spoiled rich people are getting treated as if they're the only people there. We do know that at some point he made a mistake and he double booked the room that Shane and Rachel are supposed to be staying in. So I'm pretty certain that's going to come up some more. We meet Dylan, who is one of the employees. He doesn't really do much, and yet we see him quite a few times in the episode, and they really make sure that we know the character's name, which is Dylan. In all of the scenes that we see him in, it's like background stuff that could have gone to just an extra. It could have been a nameless character, but the fact that they give him a name and that he's seen several times throughout the episode makes him a prime suspect for me. Because in mystery writing, you always want the audience to meet, the person who's the big reveal. It's a little different in this situation. Typically, it's like the killer, right? But in this situation, it's the killed. You always want to meet the person as soon as possible without making them seem suspicious. You want your audience to be aware of the killer, but you don't want to make them at the forefront of the audience's mind, because then that's too obvious, right? So when you have a character like Dylan who's always in the background and we know who he is, but he doesn't do that much, it's some red flags for me. I'm thinking this could be the person who dies. And that is our big question. Who dies? An important thing to remember about this show is that it's written and created and directed by Mike White. He is a comedy writer. I'm a big fan of his. He wrote like Nacho Libre, School of Rock. I know a lot about him because he's a former Survivor player. He almost won his season, which is one of the best seasons of Survivor of all time, David versus Goliath. And he's currently, as of this video being uploaded, playing on season 50 of Survivor. Now, if you're a fan of Survivor, I have a Survivor podcast, link down below. It's called Making the Merge. I don't know if you're interested. You can check it out. Anyways, Mike White was very inspired by his time on Survivor when making the show, and also Mike White is very much a comedy writer. So I need to keep in mind that the person who dies, it could be just like the funniest person who could die, or the person who could die in the funniest way possible. And I already have a bunch of theories on who I think could be the one who dies, starting with Mark. At the end of this episode, Mark is about to find out if he has cancer or not. But he's already acting like he's going to die. Like he's been waiting for the official results. He doesn't know, but he's acting like he's going to die. He's like telling his son he loves him, stuff like that. He's just terrified, understandably so. My theory is that there might be just a running gag throughout the entire season where every time Mark is about to find out from his doctor the results, if he has cancer or not, something happens. You know, the call drops because he's in Hawaii, or he drops his phone in the water, so his phone's damaged, so he doesn't find out the test results from his doctor. And this keeps happening the whole time he's there. And he's in his head so badly to the point where he's convinced himself that he has cancer. And then in the final episode, we see him like take his own life. Then the irony would be that his wife gets the call from the doctor right afterwards, and then they find out he didn't have cancer at all. And then it's like a whole psychological thing of like how the impending doom of potentially having cancer could really affect your psyche. My next theory is actually about Rachel. But Chase, you already said that you eliminated Rachel as a suspect for who's going to die. Why are you bringing her up? Why does she have a theory? Well, I'm glad you asked. I said that I don't think Rachel is the one who's going to die. I said nothing about her being the killer. Now, I don't know if there even is a killer, right? All that we know from the opening scene is that someone was killed. Now, I don't know if that means that someone was murdered or if it was just an accident and they died, but we need to be on the lookout for any situation. And we get a scene where Rachel is talking to Liv and Paula. They're really rude to her, classic Mean Girl stuff. My theory is maybe she gets fed up and kills one of them. Is that crazy? I don't have much to go off. My theory here is that Rachel is one of the only characters so far that comes across as very nice and wholesome and not a spoiled brat. So I can't help but be suspicious of the only likable character. Because it's like, you know, who else? If you're going to have a big twist where someone's a killer, why not make them the person that no one's going to suspect because they're one of the only likable people? My next theory is that Paula is the one who is killed. We do get this weird scene where her and Liv are like in the dark out there, and then she sees this guy who works at the hotel. Then it like cuts to something else, and then we cut back to her and Liv later talking, and Liv like asks her about it, and she's really weird about it. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe Paula gets involved with someone who works at the hotel, the resort, and something bad happens to her. Truthfully, as of this moment, it could be any one of them who could die, except for Shane. We know that Shane lives. Like, I could make up a fun theory or just come up with something from the top of my head for every single character up here, right? Like Lonnie. Maybe she has complications with the birth in the office, causes her to die. Maybe Tanya is obsessed with Belinda in a stalker way, kills Belinda. We could play this game all day. We could just pick a character, take something that we know about them from episode 1, and then just come up with a fun theory for how they could die. But here's the thing, my friends. I think that I already know how they are going to die. I don't know who is going to die yet, but I do think I know how. Drowning in the ocean. I think this for 2 major reasons. One, there's a scene where Quinn and Mark go and talk to Armand about activities that they could do at the White Lotus. And Armand makes it ridiculously clear that any ocean-related activities are canceled due to a hurricane that had swept through a few weeks ago. So, like jet skiing or water skiing, scuba diving, like all that stuff is not allowed right now. Then later on, we get a line of dialogue between Shane and Rachel when they're talking about how their room is right next to the restaurant and also right next to the ocean. And Rachel says, we can stuff ourselves and then go drown in the ocean. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Chekhov's ocean, but it goes a little bit like this. If an ocean is introduced in the first act, then it must be used to kill someone later. Otherwise, don't bring it up at all. This is basic literary stuff, guys. You should have learned about this in middle school. But seriously, the fact that they keep making us, the audience, extremely aware that the ocean is dangerous right now, I think that that means that the ocean is going to be involved in the death that happens. So since we think we know how the person is going to die, we can use that to try and figure out who is going to die. Well, who is most likely to, I sound like an owl, who is most likely to be going into the ocean? Mark is one of two characters that we know for certain have been told that the ocean is too dangerous to go in. The other one being his son Quinn, because they were standing there talking to Armand. Oh, well then I guess also Armand knows that the ocean is too dangerous. So who is likely to go out in the ocean? Probably a dumb kid who wants to party, right? Maybe Paula with her new boyfriend, boy toy, they party it up, go out into the ocean. She doesn't know that it's super dangerous. Or Dylan, who we've talked about, has been very much throughout the entire episode, but never in anything important, very much a background character. What if it's him? He doesn't actually do anything or add anything to the plot. So why is it so important for this character to be involved in the story? Like, he is the one who runs up to Armand and says, hey, Lonnie is giving birth in your office right now. Earlier in the episode when Lonnie's water breaks in the lobby, who is the one who mops it up? Dylan. And he's just like in the background. He's just already in the background cleaning something else up. And Armand almost slips. And he's like, hey, Dylan, clean this up. Like, what is the point of making him so like constant throughout the episode if there's not an important reason? But then there is a character that I know for certain will be going deep into the ocean. And that is Tanya. Because the entire reason that she is at the White Lotus in the first place is to spread her mother's ashes deep in the ocean. So my theory, hey, perhaps Tanya goes out there, middle of the ocean, spread the ashes, gets swept up, drowns. Or her new friend, Belinda, who she's obsessed with, she convinces Belinda to go with her to spread the ashes. An accident happens. Belinda drowns in the ocean. Now, this would work thematically with Tanya's whole thing, right? Which is that everyone she loves, she pushes away because she's so obsessed with them. In this case, she would literally be pushing Belinda away, who gets swept up by the strong tides because the ocean is super dangerous right now. And she literally pushes Belinda away with her obsession. Because she's so obsessed with Belinda, she makes Belinda go with her to spread the ashes. And that would make sense for why Belinda is such an important character in this episode, right? It's just like with Dylan. Why would Belinda be such an important character in this episode if it's not for an important reason later on? And my final reason for why I think that Belinda is the one who dies in the White Lotus is because of the opening scene. We see Shane, and he's very upset. But he's not upset about someone dying. No. He's upset about his own personal stuff because he's alone at the airport. Where is his wife? Personally, I think she left him on the honeymoon, right? He does not care about the person who died. Who cares about the person who died? I have important personal stuff happening right now. And I think that this is really the case because he's fine talking to this couple in the airport. When they're asking him questions about like someone died and stuff, he's fine talking about that. But it's not until they ask him where his wife is where he gets angry and upset and doesn't want to talk anymore. The people who work at the resort, the people who work for the super rich, privileged people, they do not matter to these extremely wealthy resort goers. The 4 people at the bottom of my conspiracy board, these 4 employees, they don't come from wealthy families. They are having to work. They are probably struggling financially. But who cares about them when the super rich people have so much of their problems going on? I bet that it's one of these 4 employees who dies. And the whole theme of this show is that one of the employees dies, and all of the rich people do not give a fuck because it wasn't like someone important like them died. It was just one of the employees. There's a moment where Nicole tells her husband Mark that he's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Good things happen to good people. They truly think that they're indestructible because they have money and because they're good people. Meanwhile, Lonnie is having to work at 9 months pregnant because she needs the money. Thematically, I think I've nailed it, dude. I think that Belinda is going to be the one who dies in the White Lotus. That's what I'm locking in. I think she's going to get kind of forced to go with Tanya to spread Tanya's mom's ashes. And then she's going to like fall off the boat, or there's going to be an accident. And because the ocean is super dangerous right now because of the hurricane, it's going to cause her to drown. This show rules, dude. I love big ensembles like this. Like every character has a ton of stuff going on, so it's easy to make fun theories. All right, let's go watch the next couple of episodes and see if we are on the right track.
Are they bigger?
Nicole, they're fucking huge.
I haven't seen them in a while.
It's cancer.
Swole balls.
Did they biopsy your balls, Dad?
Not yet.
All right, I just watched episodes 2 and 3, and we have learned some more information. I don't know what it is about wearing a Hawaiian shirt, but it makes me feel like Elvis. I don't even know if Elvis wore a lot of Hawaiian shirts. I'm just gonna do the rest of this video as Elvis. All right, so I just watched episodes 2 and 3 of White Lotus, and we learned a lot about all the characters. The Austin Butler Elvis movie did a lot for me personally. Very much the scene in the trailer where the Martin Luther King assassination happens, and Tom Hanks is like, it has nothing to do with us. And then Austin Butler as Elvis goes, it has everything to do with us. I don't know why they included that in the trailer. Fucking phenomenal, though. Anyway, let's talk about the White Lotus. Wait, I know why I think of Elvis when I see Hawaiian shirt. Hold on. Because Elvis did this movie, Blue Hawaii. I have the VHS. I haven't watched it yet. The only Elvis movie I've seen is Viva Las Vegas, which you think would be about Las Vegas. It's about race car driving. Okay, back to work. I don't really think we gained any information in episode 2 and 3 that will help us really decide who we think is going to die, but it does give us some information that helps us debunk some of the theories that we had in the last section. For instance, I had that theory where Mark was going to be super depressed because he still hasn't figured out if he has cancer or not. That is debunked because we find out in episodes 2 and 3, episode 2, that Mark does not have testicular cancer. Whoa, mama. I will say, though, that something very interesting with one of our other theories from last time, our theory that Belinda was going to drown while trying to help Tanya spread her mother's ashes. Remember that theory? At first, I thought that theory busted out the window, can't happen, because in episode 3, we get the scene where, well, first of all, I thought I was cooking because Tanya is like, hey, I'm going to go spread my mom's ashes. Belinda, please come with me. And Belinda's like, okay, I'll be there. And I was like, oh, shit. But then we get the scene where they're out there, and I'm like, oh, no. Like, they're not going to have the death happen in episode 3. Like, we still have 3 more episodes of the season. I'm fairly certain episode 6 is where we find out who died. So I was like, well, there goes that theory. But then while they're out there on the beach, she can't do it. She can't spread her mom's ashes. So they end up keeping the ashes and going back to shore. So it doesn't happen, which means that it still needs to happen. At some point, Tanya is going to have to spread the ashes, and I imagine she will make Belinda go with her. So I actually feel even better about that theory now, because I feel like they're almost building up to it even more. Also, we get a scene where Belinda is on the phone with her son, and basically what happens is Tanya is like, Belinda, you need to make your own business. You don't need to work here anymore. You need to run your own business. I will help you fund your own business. And so Belinda tells her son that on the phone. He's like, you need to do everything you can to make that happen. You can do this. And so the second I saw that, I was like, oh no, it's going to like build up our hopes and dreams for Tanya, the working class, the employees of this resort, just to right before she's about to be able to like make her own business and not just be, you know, treated terribly at the White Lotus by rich people all day. And then of course she's going to die in a tragic accident. And it's going to be able to make us feel like, oh my God, she almost made it. So I feel like that is a very real thing that could happen in this show. So I might lock that in again. But even if my Belinda theory isn't right, I do feel really, really good about the fact that it's going to be a drowning. Water just keeps coming up in these episodes. Like Mark and Quinn are getting their scuba licenses. And like they tease Mark not eating anything and drinking a bunch right before they go scuba diving in the pool. So I was like, oh shit, is Mark gonna die while scuba diving? Then Quinn is sleeping on the beach at night. He's sleeping on the beach at night because Liv refuses to let him sleep in like the big living room area with her and Paula in the room. So at first he has to sleep in a closet. And it gets so hot in there, he almost like dies of heat stroke. So then the mom is like, Nicole is like, Quinn, you're sleeping in here. And then like 2 seconds later, they're like, get out of here. And so he's like, fine, I'll sleep at the beach. So he sleeps on the beach. He's dead asleep. The waves come up and take away his phone and I think it's a switch. And I just felt like that was a very interesting metaphor, right? The waves come up and pull away Quinn's things into the depths of the ocean while he's dead asleep. And Quinn, who is beginning to have a bit of a fascination with the ocean and nature, maybe one night he decides to go out into the ocean and he gets swept up and taken away by the ocean. That would be pretty poetic because there is a moment where after Quinn's mom finds out that he slept on the beach, she gets mad at Liv and is like, you care so much about marginalized groups, but you don't even care about your own family. And I thought this was very interesting because the mom gets upset with her daughter for making her son go sleep on the beach, but she does absolutely nothing to stop him from sleeping on the beach. Like, I cannot stress to you enough, Quinn is still sleeping on the beach. We also see Armand relapse after being sober for 5 years. And he's really going all out. Pills, alcohol. I think it's a very real possibility that he gets wasted and then ends up out in the water. We see Dylan again in a few scenes, one of which Armand is hitting on him, and it seems to make Dylan very uncomfortable. I haven't been able to figure out what the point of Dylan in this show is. I feel like it's a very real possibility that he could be the one who dies because I don't know why else he's here. Then there's Paula, who is sleeping with one of the people who works at the resort. At one point, because Paula's sneaking out at night to do this so that Liv doesn't find out, Liv follows her, finds out about it. And there's a scene in episode 2 where Liv and Paula are doing like a bunch of drugs together. And I kind of got the vibes that Liv was in love with Paula. Could it be that Liv is jealous that Paula's going and hooking up with this dude that works at the resort, gets so jealous that she kills her? Anything's possible. What I will say too is that episode 3 had a very, had a through line for all of the characters in this show. The through line for that episode for all of the characters involved was the idea that human beings are just animals, purely motivated by sex. There's just a lot of talk about sex and as a motivation for all of the characters in this episode. Like Rachel, she's afraid that Shane only likes her for her body, and that the second that he no longer appreciates her body, she's just gonna get thrown to the side. Mark learns that his father had a secret life where he had his family, but he also would sleep with men. And it causes Mark a lot of confusion. Not necessarily because his dad was gay or bi, but because it was such a big secret that was kept from him about his own father. This leads him to spiral, and he almost hooks up with Armand at one point. Paula is hooking up with the employee guy. We get 2 separate scenes of Mark and Nicole individually talking about how after 20 years of marriage, there's no spark between them. The theme of this episode makes me think that we could possibly have the motive behind the death. So if we know the how, which is drowning, and we know the motive, which is sexual motivation or romantic motivation, for instance, Liv being in love with Paula and being jealous that Paula's hooking up with that guy, so maybe she drowns Paula. Or maybe Tanya, who is getting more and more obsessed with Belinda, is in love with Belinda, which leads to the accidental drowning. Which leads me to the theory that I think I'm actually going to lock in for this section. It's a theory that Quinn, who is beginning to have a bit of a, I won't call it a romantic connection to nature, but he's beginning to have a connection to nature, in particular the ocean. And Quinn is the only person in this show who has no one else. And I don't mean as in like he doesn't have a girlfriend. I mean like literally there's no foil character for his character, right? Like there's Mark, Nicole, Liv, and Paula. Even Tanya has Belinda. Shane has Rachel. Like everyone has someone. And then Quinn just by himself. And we get a scene where he's all alone. He's sleeping out at the beach. And there's like this beautiful shot of him watching a whale out deep in the water. And it's just a very beautiful moment of him watching nature. And then there's another shot at the end of episode 3. It's the very end of episode 3. It's just him looking out at the water. And it's like a very beautiful sunset. And you can just see in his eyes like he's beginning to love the ocean. And how does Quinn's story end, right? How does his story arc get wrapped up? Does he realize he doesn't need all of his electronics? He falls in love with nature and the outdoors. And then what? Like he just goes home with a new appreciation for nature? That doesn't feel right. But you know what does kind of feel like a good solution to that story arc? He doesn't need his electronics. He falls in love with the ocean. He ventures out into the water and it sweeps him away, never to return again. His family, who for the large part just ignored him and didn't treat him very well, wish that they had more time with him. That could potentially bring the family closer together because they're very dysfunctional. I really like this theory. I think that it really goes thematically with the show. It helps tie up his story arc in a way. So that's what I'm locking in. I'm locking in the theory that Quinn ventures out into the ocean, or maybe while he's asleep on the beach, the water takes him away. I think that Quinn is going to be the one who drowns in the ocean. That is who dies at the White Lotus. I'm really excited to see how everything plays out. I really enjoy this show. I love watching how all of the characters are connected through different moments, even small moments where they just share like a couple lines passing each other at the restaurant, or deeper stuff like how Shane and Rachel actually ended up on the boat with Tanya and Belinda when the ashes were supposed to be spread. Stuff like that. The show's incredible. I'm very excited to keep watching. So let's go watch the next 2 episodes and see if we are on the right track and that Quinn is the one who dies in the White Lotus.
Surprise! Mom! Am I interrupting? I know it's only your honeymoon. Oh my God, look at her face. Rachel, you were such a beautiful bride, but also very pale. But now you have a little more color and it looks great.
All right, dude, I just watched episodes 4 and 5. I feel so confident that whoever is going to die drowning in the ocean. We are just getting more and more shots of the ocean, just waves crashing. One shot of the ocean was set at like sunrise or sunset to where it was red, and the water actually looked like blood. And my Quinn theory feels very strong. At one point, his mom realizes he's still sleeping on the beach, and she says he could be swept away by the tide. At one point, we even see Quinn floating by himself in the ocean. Then we see Quinn make some friends who are these jacked dudes in a canoe, and they're like on a rowing team, and he joins them. He has a blast. It's a very wholesome experience. Then we see where Quinn and his dad, they finally have completed their scuba training in the pool, and they're getting to go scuba in the ocean. They're going to go out on a boat with the whole family. It's going to be like a whole family outing, but it goes sideways. How does it go sideways? Thank you for asking. Basically, at one point, Mark had an affair against his wife. Is that what it's called when you have an affair against someone? Basically, a long time ago, I guess, some point of the 20 years that they were married, Mark had an affair against Nicole. Now, Nicole does know about it. She almost left Mark, but Mark somehow convinced her to stay by buying her very expensive bracelets. But I don't think it was just buying the bracelets that caused her to stay. He probably had to just beg and plead and try to convince her to stay. And they promised to never speak about it. But Mark is having a crisis, like everyone else at this resort. In an effort to try to get closer to his son, he tells his son Quinn about the affair that he had against Quinn's mother. Now, Quinn accidentally lets slip to his mom that he knows about it, which causes Nicole to go and talk to Mark and be like, why did you speak about the thing we said we were never going to speak about? And then he has to try to explain the whole situation. Then, as they were getting on the boat together to go out and do the scuba diving adventure, Mark makes a comment to Nicole that causes Nicole to have a meltdown. She storms off. Mark follows her. Before he leaves, he tells the person driving the boat, hey, if I'm not back in a few minutes, y'all just go out. You do the scuba thing without me, Quinn. He runs off. So the kids, Quinn, Liv, and Paula, they go out on the boat by themselves with the person who drives the boat. But Quinn does not, I repeat, does not go scuba diving without his dad. He waits for his dad. It's actually a wholesome moment later on when Quinn tells his dad that he told the instructor that he wanted to wait for his dad, and so they're going to do it the next day. In fact, it's a very beautiful family moment in general, because this whole family, this very dysfunctional family, is actually closer together after the robbery. What robbery? Thank you for asking. Paula has been hooking up with this guy named Kai. Now, Kai works at the resort. Paula wants to help him with his financial situation, so she finds out the code to the safe in their hotel room, their resort room, because she's already fed up with this family that she's staying with. She's mad at Liv because Liv is very possessive of her. I think it's because Liv is in love with her, but there's a whole ordeal with an ex-boyfriend that Liv stole from Paula. I don't know how that situation started or ended, but it seems like it's a traumatic thing. And then also this family is just very privileged. There's a lot of uncomfortable conversations about like race and just very tone-deaf situation. So like I said, she figures out the code to the safe, gives it to Kai so that he can go in and steal the $75,000 bracelets that belong to Nicole. Now, I don't know if you're keeping track at home, but these are the $75,000 bracelets that Nicole was given by Mark after Mark had his affair. And Paula gives him the number to the code and says, go and steal them while we are out on the boat scuba diving. You can see how this becomes a problem considering that Nicole storms off and Mark follows her and they don't actually get on the boat. They go back to the room where Kai is currently stealing the $75,000 bracelets. So it's a whole thing, right? Nicole gets back first. He has to like slam Nicole down on the ground. But Mark shows up a little bit afterwards, tackles Kai. Kai, obviously, he's a badass, so he starts punching down Mark. Mark takes a few to the face, but he was heroic enough to try and stop the invader, and that causes his entire family to respect him, which is all he really wants. The show's pretty baller. I highly recommend all of you watch it. Because remember what I said at the beginning of this video. This is not a recap of the show White Lotus. I have left out some really awesome plot points and storylines. I'm only discussing things that I think help me solve the mystery of the show, which is who dies. In this show, not really about that. That's just kind of an element that keeps you hooked at the beginning. There's tons of stuff for you. I'm out of breath from that. But yeah, there's a lot of moments that I haven't brought up that you guys should go watch the show on your own time and experience. Like when Belinda and Shane catch Armand and Dylan hooking up in Armand's office after they did a bunch of drugs together. The reason that I brought all of this up is to say that at the end of the day, Quinn and Mark are going scuba diving tomorrow, which is episode 6, the final episode of the season, and the episode where we are going to find out who died. So I think that my Quinn theory could very well come true. Maybe Quinn dies while they're scuba diving in episode 6. Now, there's another event that has been hyped up all season long that involves the ocean, and that is the fact that Tanya needs to spread her mother's ashes in the ocean. That has also been saved for episode 6 when we find out who is dead. So the Tanya and Belinda theory could still work with a certain caveat. I bet you were probably wondering, who's this bald guy? That's Greg. Now, Greg is Tanya's new boy toy that she has found here on the resort. Potentially, Greg could be a serial killer and kill Tanya. Now, I don't think that's this kind of show anymore. Like in the first couple episodes, I was like, oh, maybe someone does kill someone else. But I think it's definitely clear to me that whatever happens, whatever causes the death, it's not going to be a serial killer or like a cold-blooded murder. It's probably just going to be an accident. That being said, I don't think Greg is actually going to be a serial killer, but I do think he could be the one who dies. We've gotten this little story arc with Tanya throughout the show. She says that she pushes away every man she's ever loved because she's obsessed with them. And now she has found someone who wants to stick around even after seeing her at her most, how do I say this sensitively, chaotic, psychotic, insane. So how poetic for her to finally find someone who will not run away from her, and then he just drops dead. The reason I think this is because there's a scene after the two of them hook up where he's like coughing really badly and he goes, oh, it's just all the cigars, don't worry about it. But I'm thinking he could have some serious health issues. What if he just has a heart attack, drops dead? He's the one who dies this season. That feels like it would work thematically with the show. We're following the detailed, crazy lives of all these rich people, right? And then at the end of the season, the big death was actually just some random guy. Had nothing to do with everybody else. Then there is Armand, who's really fallen off the wagon. He's going ham, taking all of the pills and drugs that he found in Paula's bag that Liv and Paula accidentally left on the beach. I'm thinking that he could potentially overdose, or he takes a bunch of drugs, goes out in the ocean and drowns. I don't really know. And then last but not least, there is Rachel. Could Rachel be the one who dies after all? I know that we said in episode 1 immediately, hey, it's not going to be her because it's such an implication in that opening scene that it is her. We see a guy who just went to the White Lotus on his honeymoon, and then he's in the airport a week later, at the end of the week, alone at the airport, and there's a body being put on the plane. My thought was she and him broke up on their honeymoon. But the show is trying to make you think, oh, she's the one who died. The only reason that I'm thinking maybe, potentially, she could be the one who dies is at the end of episode 5, we see this moment. She's been having a crisis this whole season about how she's made a huge mistake. She doesn't think that she loves Shane, or if she does, she doesn't want to sacrifice her career. She doesn't think she's happy. And then at the very last scene of the episode, she's sitting on the edge of the bed and she goes, I've made a huge mistake. And then she just walks away. Perhaps she walks right into the ocean. But who am I officially locking in for who I think dies? We should be finding out in the very next episode. So this is our last chance to get this right. I still feel very good about my Quinn theory. All of the shots of him in the water, his family not really paying attention to him. At one point, we get a scene where Nicole goes, we should have let Quinn bring a friend. And Liv goes, what friend? And she goes, well, what about that one friend he had? And Liv goes, that guy moved away 2 years ago. This family does not give a fuck about Quinn. They don't know what he's up to. They don't care about his interests. They don't pay any attention to him. So it would be very sad if he's the one who dies, but I could definitely see that being the resolution to this story. And there's also just little instances, little lines of dialogue that kind of foreshadow that he could be the one who dies. When his phone gets swept away by the water, he's asking everyone, hey, can I use your phone? I need a phone today. And everybody's like, sorry, we need our phones. You can't have them. And he goes, you're going to regret this. And then he storms off. Now, typically, if you're watching a mystery show, which this isn't even really a mystery show, but if you're watching a show where you know someone dies and they say, you're going to regret this, makes you think that maybe they're the killer. But in this situation, when he says, you're going to regret this, maybe the implication from the show is that you're going to regret this because I'm going to be gone. And when I'm gone, you're going to wish you gave me your phone so I could play Angry Birds. However, I'm afraid that maybe I've become too obsessed with making my Quinn theory work, right? And because I think it's going to be Quinn, I start picking out all these little moments that convince me that I'm right. And then there's the Greg theory. And I actually think that works even better, if I'm being honest. We've been given the hint that he's ill because he's coughing a bunch. Tanya's story arc, it kind of makes a lot of sense if Greg solves all of her problems and then he dies. And so I kind of think I'm going to lock in Greg as the one who dies. That's the whole thing about the show, right? Is all of the individual characters in this ensemble, their story arcs have to come to a resolution. And I think that all of them will, except for I don't know how Tanya's would, right? Like either like she ends up funding Belinda's business or she doesn't. That wraps up Belinda's storyline. But what about Tanya, who is once a romantic companion, but feels like she pushes everyone away? I think it would be almost a tragically hilarious resolution if she finally gets what she wants and then he dies. Remember, guys, this is a comedy. This is a comedy show. And even though it feels like a drama most of the time because of the writing is all about, you know, these very complex characters and there's some dark stuff, but then there's also a lot of funny stuff. Mike White is a comedy writer, and I think it's darkly hilarious if Greg dies. That's what I'm trying to say. Greg, I think, is the funniest to die. So I'm locking in Greg. Let's go watch the last episode of White Lotus and find out if we solved White Lotus before the reveal.
You are so talented. Do you really know what you're doing? You think you could have dinner with me at the hotel tonight?
I get off at 7.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, like a couple minutes after 7 at the restaurant.
Sounds great.
I was off. I was way off. Way off. I just watched episode 6. Fantastic ending to this show. I had a blast. We finally figure out who dies. And I did not see that coming. How do you think they die? Let me ask you. You think they drown? You think they maybe drop dead from a heart attack? Neither. Armand is stabbed to death by Shane. Basically, Armand, on a lot of drugs, breaks into Shane's room. Shane, already on edge because Rachel has told him essentially that she doesn't think that they should be married. Then Shane also already knew about the break-in. Remember when Kai broke into the room, stole the stuff? Well, he was made aware of this. And so he's on edge because he's like, oh God, someone's going to break into our room. I have to be ready and be prepared to protect me and my new wife. So he has a knife by his bedstand. Armand is broken into the bedroom. So Shane thinks that someone who is a thief, someone who is attacking rich people, has broken into their room, grabs the knife, turns the corner, stab. Armand dies right there on the bathroom floor. Well, in a bathtub. He falls into the bathtub, but it's still, I mean, there's no water in it. So it's like essentially the bathroom floor. Incredible reveal, honestly. I did not see it coming, but it makes sense. I really thought I was cooking with the Quinn theory. He actually ends up not going home. He stays and joins the rowing team on the canoe. Rachel ends up getting back with Shane at the airport, choosing the lifestyle and the privilege that Shane can give her instead of her own happiness. Jesus. Mark and Nicole are happier than ever. Liv and Paula seem to have made up after Liv was very upset with Paula because she figured out that Paula was the one that gave Kai the code to the safe. Tanya and Greg run off together, so Tanya is very happy. She finds closure, spreads her mother's ashes. Tanya does burn Belinda on the business thing, which devastates Belinda. And it gives us the best performance of the season. The moment where Belinda is told by Tanya that she is not going to be funding her business. And Belinda is doing this silent crying where she's trying not to look upset, but she's obviously devastated. The actress who plays Belinda, tremendous job in this scene. And the show does end kind of how we expected, with all of the rich people having their problems solved and they're all happy. And then all of the people who don't come from that privilege, who don't come from that money, they're still on the bottom. Like even Rachel, who doesn't come from money. She's never going to be happy. She chose to go with Shane, which was her decision. But it was because she had to sacrifice her happiness in order to have a life that is comfortable, I guess. I don't know. Like even Armand, before he gets stabbed to death, which is a bummer, like he finds out he's going to be fired right before that happens. So it's like every single person who doesn't come from privilege gets stepped on in the end. Like even Paula, who's having a breakdown because she feels solely responsible for Kai being caught for stealing from the room, right? So she's ruined his life and she kind of accepts her place as Liv's like plaything. It's wild, man. So the question that came to mind immediately after we find out that Armand is the one who dies is it even solvable? Would I have been able to solve this? I think yes, it is solvable. There was a major storyline between Armand and Shane. They had a big rivalry, right? So it wouldn't have been insane to predict that rivalry would end with Armand being the death. Plus, Armand was on this path of destruction with all of the drugs and the alcohol. But I do not think that there was any way to predict that he would get stabbed. Figuring that out, impossible. They do set up the knife that he gets stabbed with. Remember how I brought it up, how Shane had a knife because he thought someone was going to break in? But that wasn't set up until episode 6, the beginning of episode 6. So there would have been absolutely no way to know that the person who dies gets stabbed. I think the drowning thing was a good theory. Obviously it didn't come true, but at least there was reasons to think that. I think where I messed up is I got way too caught up in my theory about Quinn. I kind of made up my own fan fiction. I've been known to do this when trying to solve a mystery. I was so caught up in trying to make the Quinn theory work that I did not look into every single possibility, which would have probably led me to Armand, or maybe it would have led me to Dylan. It could have led me to the Kai situation. I don't know, but I think that was my downfall. So I did not solve this one. It is not a win, but I had a great time watching the show. So I guess that is a win. Thanks again to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Follow me on Instagram. I'm trying to get to 10,000. There's no reason really. I just like the numbers to go up. All right, dope.